So once we have a structural concrete column loaded into our project and we change it to the size that we want, keep in mind that the largest columns are going to be probably closer to the ground and the smaller ones will be closer to the roof because there's less area for load to transfer to. We're going to go ahead and place some of these, and by default what Revit wants to do is sort of snap to your grid lines and place them at the locations here. I'm going to put one first at the corner, but before I do that, I need to check a few of these things. Now, you have two options here under the sort of modifications. We can either choose the depth of the column or the height of the column, and the way that this class is set up is sort of closer to a structural engineering method, where we are on the second floor looking at the structure that holds the second floor up. And so we need to create columns going down from the starting from the second floor. So if we choose height here, you can see that the level changes to the level above, and if we choose depth here, it changes to the level below, and our placement plane is on the level 2. It's on the sort of structural plan that we're at. So I'm going to click here, and you can see it's sort of covered up. Now, if you followed my last tutorial, you can see I showed you how to make a detail region, which shows you where your structure for your steel and your concrete are going to be divided. If it's being hidden, go ahead and double click it and change the boundaries so they're just sort of off. You can also use the align tool and bring it directly into place, but it's not so necessary. But that means we have a clean sort of detail. So let's go to a 3D view, my 3D structural view that I sort of created here, and you can see where this is being placed. Now, I do have some floors in here. Floors aren't 100% necessary. We're either going to have to change them or recreate them, but they're kind of nice to have to see what's going on. But you can see it started at the top of the level 2 and it went all the way down. Now I can take this, and because it's in the right location, I can copy it from grid line to grid line. And the corners of these openings are good locations for your structural grid, but you should have your structural grid sort of sketched out. So you should know where most of these are going to start to go. And this is sort of following the motif that you should diagram and study on paper, and then go into Revit and try and do it as few times in Revit as possible. But if we need to make larger changes, then Revit is parametric in that sense, and everything will adjust. But here you can see I've copied some over, and they're all sort of in an empty zone where an elevator would be. And you can see that let's hide these elements just to show you what's going on here. Let's change this to a shaded mode, and you can see that these basically go through the floor. Now that's fine for concrete, and when we get to steel we actually have to change that. But what if you have to create a lot of columns all at once and you don't want to maybe copy and paste all of them? Well, I'm going to go to structured column, and I'm going to use this @grids command. And what this allows me to do is if I select grids, you can see that a column appears. Now if I don't hit enter, or if I don't control click something and I just re-click another 2 grid lines, these will disappear. So we need to control click if we want more grid lines or more grid intersections to happen. So just to show you how this could work is I could select all of the exterior ones. You can see I've already created one there. It's going to probably duplicate that, so we might have to delete that later. But I'll control click all of these elements. So here you can see this is quite a lot, and we might not need those, so I can shift click where I don't want columns. And I can click here, click this one, shift click this one, and then essentially I have my structural grid. I have a row of columns here, a row of columns here, and I'm going to infill this with beams and girders. So the last step here is that you have to click finish, and now if I go to my structural 3D view, you can see that the columns have been populated for my structure. Now the last thing I'll note here is sometimes you'll get weird intersections with your walls if you've develop the envelope. What I would recommend is taking your envelope and actually aligning it to the outside of your column so that your grid doesn't have to be redrawn and recreated. We're essentially adjusting our architecture to the structure because structure is paramount for this class rather than the architectural envelope. We can sort of fudge that stuff into place later. So I'm going to go to Modify here. I'm going to use the Align command, or AL, as the shortcut. I'm going to select the edge of one of these columns and then the edge of my wall. You might have to adjust here. But what that allows us to do is essentially prioritize the structure. Now, if you have a very complex facade, you can go backwards. You can adjust the grid to and the structure to the envelope, and there's a couple methods to do that. You can actually drag these inside or use a similar method to align it. Or if you select these columns, you can see that it says Move with Grid. So if you need to change multiple, you can actually align this grid or move it so that the center line of the grid runs along the exterior of the wall, or sorry, the interior of the wall. And moving the grid means that all of the columns on this line will snap. So here you can see that there's multiple columns inside the wall. So the first method, again, is to align the exterior of the structure, or align the interior of the envelope to the exterior of the structure. The alternative method is to take this grid line and move it from so that the interior, or so the exterior of the wall is on, sorry, the interior of the wall is on the exterior of the structure. So let's do it one more time. Select the grid line, and because we're moving the grid line, we actually need to move the structure to the interior. So we want this point to be here. And that will move all of them and associate with the correct location.